Munzer Slayman is the Vice Chair of the National Council of Arab Americans. Thank you, Munzer. Our next speaker is A.N.S.W.E.R, National Coordinator of the World Can't Wait.
I'm happy to be here today. My name is A.N.W.E.R. I'm the Director of the World Can't Wait Drive Out the Bush Regime, and I bring you news that a growing movement and demand for the impeachment of George Bush and Dick Cheney is being brought into the march on March 17th at the Pentagon, as this demand for accountability is spreading across this country. A newly formed campaign, Impeach '07, is bringing 25 such organizations from around the country whose primary focus is the impeachment of the Bush administration into the march together with the anti-war movement. When we started the effort to drive out the Bush regime in July of 2005, we said your government, on the basis of outrageous lies, is waging a murderous and utterly illegitimate war on Iraq with other countries in their sights. 655,000 Iraqi civilians dead. And Bush is escalating the war despite the popular will and the elections of November '06. 21,000 more troops to Baghdad. And now, moving towards an attack on Iran. Absolutely unconscionable, with no popular support anywhere in the world, especially in this country. And our movement intends to march a week from Saturday, raising the demand, stop the war on Iraq, no war on Iran, impeach. The bloodletting in Iraq must be stopped. We cannot allow an attack on Iran. Bush and Cheney must be impeached and held accountable and investigated, and the whole dangerous direction of this administration must be brought to a halt. Only the popular upheaval from below can push both the Republicans and the Democrats into compliance with the people's will. This is why we are marching on March 17th on the Pentagon in this historic march. The Bush doctrine of preemptive war, torture, evisceration of habeas corpus, secret spying and detention are matters of great political and moral significance, as the other speakers have referred to. If we do not drive the Bush regime from office and repudiate their whole program, not only will the death and destruction continue for 2 more years, but all that Bush has done, the unitary executive and the whole package, will not only be codified but legitimized. What they have done rises to the level of war crimes and crimes against humanity. And the march on the Pentagon is an expression of people living across this country that we will not accept this being done in our name. Thank you.
A.N.S.W.E.R, World Can't Wait. Our next speaker is the Reverend Lennox Yearwood from the Hip Hop Caucus.
Good afternoon. My name is Reverend Yearwood. I am the president of the Hip Hop Caucus, and the Hip Hop Caucus is dedicated to change based on principles of dignity, justice, self-determination, and peace for all the peoples of the world. I'm glad to be with A.N.S.W.E.R, The World Can't Wait, my comrades, my dear peace mom in the movement, Sheehan, and my dear friend Carlos. As we enter the 5th year, many of you are wondering why this march. Obviously, we're going ahead at full steam. We've done marches before, we've had vigils before, we've cried before. But why this march? Don't you get it? This administration is hell-bent on war. Why don't you just wait a few months, maybe when that president is gone, maybe we can create some change. Well, on March 6, 1857, 150 years ago today, not too far from where I'm standing, the Supreme Court rendered a decision. And that decision was the Dred Scott decision. And that decision looked like everybody who looked like me was not a citizen of this country. They made a decision 150 years ago today that Africans could not be citizens of this country. Well, we're grateful that there were some who fought against that and fought through civil wars and fought through mass lynchings and fought through segregation and fought through Jim Crow and fought through the civil rights movement and fought through what we saw in Katrina, that there are bad decisions. And we as Americans, black and white, need to fight against bad decisions, because if that had been in place today, I would not be standing here today. So there was a decision made. As a matter of fact, we know it wasn't even a decision. It was a decision to call out an all-out lie. To kill 600,000 plus Iraqis. 3,000 plus American troops. But now that because that decision was made, and I am now a proud, because of these people, American citizen. When I graduated from Maxwell Air Force Base, Officer Training School, as an officer in the United States Air Force, I received something that said, an officer first, but a leader always. It is our duty, if we want to fix this decision as Americans, that we march on the Pentagon. Dr. King said it best, and his exact quote was as follows. He said that a nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. I don't know how this president sleeps at night. I don't know how this vice president sleeps at night. As a matter of fact, I don't know how Nancy Pelosi and Murtha, I don't know how they sleep at night. Because I can tell you, for somebody who was an officer in the Air Force, I can't sleep at night, knowing that these babies are laying in the ground who should not be there. That these mothers and fathers put their babies in the ground because of lies. How can we sleep at night, knowing that 600,000 Iraqis, babies, are dead in a 4-year span? So we march on the Pentagon. We march on the Pentagon to let the world know that we can't wait. The world can't wait. And this madness must stop now.
Cindy Sheehan, I think, doesn't require an introduction. Her singular role as a person who took the loss of her son and helped lead not only other parents, but a whole country, really in a crusade against the Bush administration and the crimes, the war crimes, the crimes against humanity, has made Cindy a recognized face, not only throughout the United States, but all over the world, where the people of the world are looking to the people of the United States, asking, when will you stand up? When will we stand up? And in that sense, she is, in many ways, the best emissary, the very, very best emissary from the people of the United States to the people of the world in the struggle against the Bush administration and in the struggle to end this war, not tomorrow, but today. Please welcome Cindy Sheehan.
Good afternoon. I'm here to represent Gold Star Families for Peace and the Camp Casey Peace Institute. My son, Carlos' son, the almost 3,200 Americans who have been killed, the tens of thousands who have been maimed, the tens of thousands more who are spiritually maimed, emotionally maimed, the people of Iraq, the people of Iran, the people of Syria, the people of the region who have no voice. And what the Rev said was that 150 years ago, his people were declared non-citizens. Less than 100 years ago, people looked like me couldn't even vote. And it was people like us that stood up to that injustice, that rectified that. We just found out before we came here that Scooter Libby was convicted of 4 out of 5 counts. One of the reasons we're marching on the Pentagon on March 17th is for impeachment and accountability. The 3rd article of impeachment for Richard Nixon was about how Richard Nixon abused his office to punish his political enemies. The Bush regime has committed so many crimes against our Constitution, so many crimes against humanity. They are enemies of humanity, and that's one of the reasons we must march. 23% of this country, unbelievably, still think George Bush is doing a good job in Iraq. I don't know where these people are. I don't know what forces are keeping them ignorant. I don't know what forces are keeping them blind. I don't know what forces they follow. But there's some right-wing nut jobs out there. One of them's name is Melanie Malkin or something like that. And she has a video on YouTube saying that we're going to desecrate the Vietnam Memorial. She says that we already have, and she shows pictures of obviously photoshopped memorials that we supposedly desecrated. We have never been about being against the soldier. We have never been about being against the troops. We have never been about desecrating people who have had their lives stolen from them all throughout our history by criminal regimes who use war as a diplomatic tool. The first time I came to Washington, D.C. was exactly 6 months after my son was killed. And I went to the Vietnam Memorial, and I placed his picture at the foot of that memorial with his brothers and sisters who had their lives stolen from them also. I've had vigils in the memorial. I honor the memories of those soldiers. And it's time for them to stop using these people to distract us from the real issue. And the issue is there should not be a Vietnam wall. The issue is there should not be a future Iraq wall. There should not be a wall that stretches for seemingly forever of our loved ones killed in Iraq. And if there was a wall erected to the Vietnamese people who were killed, it would go for miles. And if there was going to be a wall erected for the Iraqi people, it would go for miles. But you know what? We don't know their names. They're nameless to this country, and they're nameless to George Bush. George Bush, our soldiers are nameless to him. I want to say, the people who are fomenting this trouble, we honor our children who have gone before us. And if you want to come and join us in this march to stop this insane administration who does not support the troops, this administration who sent them over to die for lies, who didn't give them body armor, who didn't give them sufficient protection, who doesn't give them clean water or appropriate food, proper food, enough food. This administration who is sending them to Iraq to kill innocent Iraqis, they're the ones that don't support the troops. We support the troops because we want them to come home alive. The real issues are accountability. To hold this administration accountable for what they have done to the world. The real issues are ending the occupation of Iraq to save our soldiers and to save the people of Iraq. And the real issue is not to invade Iran, which is an invitation to Armageddon. And there is popular support for these issues in the country. You know, I hate to contradict Deborah, but the popular support comes from Congress. And we have to stand up and say, you know what? We went out in record numbers on November 7th, and we voted against George Bush, we voted against his lies, we voted against his war, we voted against further aggression, and we voted for you to stop it. And we must march to show our Congress that we're not going, we realize that our jobs in democracy don't end with election, that we will make our votes count. I just got back from Turkey. Well, actually, I just got back from Vermont. But before I went to Vermont and went to 13 towns in Vermont working on impeachment, I was in Turkey. I went to a peace conference in Turkey, in Istanbul. And I shared the podium with, thank you. I shared the podium with two Iraqi gentlemen. One was a scientist and one was an educator. To listen to stories, and everybody, I encourage everybody to seek out stories of non-green zone Iraqi people, non-green zone soldiers. And after they told their stories, I apologized for our country on behalf of our country. But I was appalled. I was hurt. I was devastated when attendee after attendee rose up from the audience and congratulated the Iraqi people on the insurgency that's killing our soldiers. They said, your insurgency in Iraq gives the rest of the world hope. They said, you are holding off the mightiest military in history. And you know what? They're right. What George Bush has done has proven how weak we are and has made us the detested laughingstock of the world. I want America to be the hope for the world. I want the people of the world to look at America for hope and not a violent insurgency. And that's why we have to stop our leaders from solving problems so violently and so dreadfully. That's why we should march on March 17th to give hope to the world. Thank you.
Hayden Hilliard is the co-founder of the Partnership for Civil Justice, also the co-chair of the National Lawyers Guild Mass Legal Defense Committee.
Good afternoon. What you've just heard today is clearly an enormous threat. And I mean that truly. This is a threat because the people who stand here, magnified and multiplied, not just by thousands or tens of thousands, but by millions, in the sentiment of the people of the United States, is the political threat that this administration and that the Pentagon and that the warmongers and war makers who are sending children to die in Iraq and killing hundreds of thousands of Iraqis, it is a threat that they fear. And we saw that fear when the Answer Coalition sought to get a permit to march on the Pentagon. We were told there was no way that we would get a march permit, that we would be able to march on the Pentagon, because there have been no mass marches on the Pentagon that get close to the Pentagon for an awfully long time. And in fact, when they applied for a permit, there was no response. They kept calling, they were writing, they were asking, and the Pentagon threw up this absolute wall of silence, refusing to respond to a legitimate permit request. And the reason that these organizations and the Answer Coalition sought a permit is because it's important that there be an avenue of expression for the tens of thousands of angry people in the United States and the tens of thousands of people who have aspirations for a better way, to be able to come and come without fear, so that people can bring their grandparents and bring their children and know that they can march on the Pentagon and do so, so that targeted communities can come, so that everyone can come. And so the Pentagon wouldn't respond. And when it became clear that the lack of response was going to drive them and drive us directly to court, they responded. Then they met with us, then they began talking to us a little bit, and they began saying that there would be fees, that there would be unknown fees, huge fees that would be levied upon the people of the United States seeking to go to the government offices of the Department of Defense to tell them that they oppose the war in Iraq. An incredible idea that they think they can charge the people of the United States coming together in mass assembly to express a point of view, to express a cherished First Amendment protected viewpoint, the classic redress of grievances. And we told them there was no way the anti-war movement was going to pay a penny to the Department of Defense. And then they said, well, maybe it won't be that much. Maybe it'll just be $10,000. $10,000, they said to us, would be, in their words, negligible. Now, $10,000, of course, in the Pentagon budget, we said to them, we understand, is negligible. Indeed, $10,000 in the Pentagon budget is 3.5 seconds of the Iraq War. Oh, there it goes, $10,000. You just saw it pass by. And we said no, $10,000 will not be happening, $1,000 will not be happening, a penny will not be happening. And the more that we discussed this, and the more they thought about it, the Pentagon came back, and then they decided and told us that they'd given it a lot of thought, and they'd given it further consideration, and in their words, they felt that maybe it wasn't really worth $10,000 for them to have to spend the next 2 weeks litigating in federal district court for our rights to demonstrate. Which was, we think, a wise decision on their part. They could not have survived that challenge. But also, aside from the legal challenge, they can't survive the political challenge, because there's no way that people are going to stand for that. And we saw that same thing then happen when the state of Virginia tried to throw up its own hurdles to this demonstration. Another hurdle along the way. This demonstration will start from 23rd Constitution and march over the Memorial Bridge and on Route 27 into the Pentagon. About 100 yards of Route 27 is under the jurisdiction of the state of Virginia. So the state of Virginia then said, in response to organizers' efforts at a permit request, that, well, first they wouldn't respond at all to. That seems to be a popular way of going. Then what they did is they told organizers that there would be unknown user fees, and they asked organizers to sign a piece of paper stating that they would agree to pay an unknown, unidentified amount of money at some point in the future without ever even saying what it was. And again, organizers said, no, we have the right to march, we have a First Amendment right to march, and the Answer Coalition will not be paying for that right to march. And the Department of Transportation for Virginia then said, well, in addition, we can't give you a permit to march unless you give us an engineering plan that tells us what our road closures will be. So here's the Virginia Department of Transportation asserting that it wants, in essence, lay people to work out their traffic safety plan for them, and that they were going to have to come up with an engineering plan. And the organizers said, are you serious? You really want us to come up with your traffic safety engineering road closure plan, which is a complete absurdity. And they said, well, you should hire an engineering firm, and then you should submit it to us, and then we'll review it, and if we feel that it's adequate, then perhaps we'll give you a permit, and plus you're going to have to pay us an unknown amount of money. And one organizer said, well, what is the criteria? Because any constitutionally permissible permitting system has to have clear criteria and rules and guidelines. You can't have just discretion, unbridled discretion of a decision maker to decide what passes and what doesn't. It just doesn't work like that, and the Constitution doesn't allow it to work like that. They said that they couldn't tell organizers what would be an acceptable road closure or permitting plan, because that would be, quote, like asking my college professor to write my papers for me and then giving me an A. This is the state of Virginia and its idea of what they think is constitutionally permissible permitting. So we said, okay, well, That's not going to fly either, but we want to point out that the Freedom Walk, which is the Department of Defense pro-war sponsored event that they ran 2 years in a row, and walked the exact same route. They did it. So tell you what, these people are going to do the same route that they did. Whatever you close for the Freedom Walk, you can close for anti-war protesters. And we want to see that permit and that route closure, those road closures. And the state of Virginia said that they couldn't show us that because that would be plagiarism. At this point, it became very clear that these communications were not really going anywhere with the decision makers in the state of Virginia Department of Transportation. In these discussions, we raised the issue that their conduct and their permitting process as applied and facially was fully unconstitutional, and it too would end up now having to be tested in court. And what they told us was remarkable. They said that they weren't sure that the Constitution applied in the state of Virginia. And, you know, obviously there must be some questions about their upholding of the state of Virginia, but we felt certain that it does indeed apply in the state of Virginia. At this point, an alert was sent out to the anti-war movement. And in a matter of 24, 48 hours, thousands of people across the United States immediately sent letters and faxes and made phone calls to the state of Virginia Attorney General's office saying that this will not stand, and that they are coming, and that they support all those that are coming, and that people were marching. And remarkably, very quickly, the state of Virginia's plan and obstruction collapsed. We had demanded the Freedom Walk permitting materials. They had refused to give them to us for months. We got our hands on them. And these fees that they told us that the anti-war movement has to pay, well, on the Freedom Walk permit, there's a little line that says they were waived. This would be the Department of Defense Donald Rumsfeld Freedom Walk. So for Donald Rumsfeld and his 10,000 over 3.5 seconds, the fees are waived for that corporate sponsored event as well. But for the anti-war movement, they want to charge them. The anti-war movement will not be paying a dime, and the anti-war movement has the permits it needs. We're really happy now to be able to report that victory. This will be a permitted demonstration. It is a safe demonstration. As I said, people can bring their grandparents, bring their children. I'll be bringing my 2-year-old. And tens of thousands of people will be coming to the Pentagon, to the site of the war machine, to the site of the war machine that is killing so many.